Fellas, it is finally here. New World, the MMO that I literally put 200 hours into the beta, is finally releasing. Now, during the beta, I was actually writing down tips. And what started off being like a top 10 tip video turned into 15 to 20. Fellas, we're now 30 plus tips. That's a lot of tips, man. Some things I'm gonna spend a little more time on, and some of them we're just gonna run straight through them. And if you don't understand these tips right now, I can promise you, once you get into the game, you'll get it eventually. Timestamps, though, for all of these tips will be listed below, so feel free to check that one out. And if we miss anything, feel free to comment it down below. Now, starting with tip number 1, join a company early. Listen, fellas, you don't have to stay in the company forever unless you're just really dedicated like that, but joining a company early will get you involved in the aspects that New World really has strengths in, such as warring and of course the social aspects. Primarily, one of the biggest benefits is I can't tell you how many times I've been inside one of the dungeons where my team was terrible and I needed to call on someone to jump in, whether we needed a healer or a tank or just somebody to help us finish it out. Having a company might save you in those moments. Tip number 2, pick up town board quests. Now, the first beta, town board quest was like the best way to get your level up really fast. I know they got a nerf, but they're also still pretty good, considering a lot of them you could be doing as you're doing regular side and main quests and leveling up things. Picking up some of those town board quests in each one of those towns, and when you return to them, having the materials on you allows you to turn them in and get experience, gold, and other things, which just tacks on extra experience. Some of them can range from a lot of different things though, from cooking specific items to killing certain beasts in the surrounding areas. But in my opinion, doing those town board quests are definitely still worth picking up. Now, moving on to tip number 4, select territory standing upgrades. Fellas, this is something that a lot of people forgot, and even for a moment there, I forgot. But as you begin to do stuff in certain territories, you have a standing, which could substantially increase both your reputation gains, your overall gathering gains, the crafting fees can get cut down for you. All you have to do though is go to your map, open up your territory standing, and select one of the options that will benefit you when you're in that territory. There's a lot of people though, myself included, that had a lot of upgrades and would just forget about them. And these are upgrades that can increase your experience and save you a lot of money. And if you don't know which ones to pick, just go with reputation gains. That's normally what I would do. I'd be like, yo, I really don't know what to go for here. I'm not gathering here yet, and I'm not crafting here yet. That's fine. Just overcompensate for more reputation gains. Moving on to tip number 5. This is kind of a personal one for me because I did a lot of crafting, but choose 2 adjoining areas to hub everything. Now, preferably, it's 2 adjoining areas of the same faction, preferably your faction. And the 2 areas and settlements that you choose has high tier crafting stations. You don't want to choose a territory that nobody else is in, because number 1, the stuff you're crafting, you'll have to go to another town to even sell those things. And number 2, eventually, as you get your level up in those crafting skills, you're gonna run into a wall. And that wall is essentially the tier wall of those stations. If they're not upgraded, which is done by the town itself and the factions themselves, you will eventually have to transfer all of those materials to another settlement to continue doing whatever it is you're doing. Now, I mentioned 2 adjacent settlements. I like to just do this because just splitting the difference would give me more storage space to go back and forth between them, and if I had to do any transfer costs, it will be less. And as you start to perfect this system, you'll get to a point where one settlement, say for instance, is just purely devoted to like smelting, engineering, weapon crafting, etc. And then the other settlement is more focused for all your cooking, arcana, jewel crafting, and you'll start to associate specific settlements to where you store the materials that's required for crafting there. And I know not everyone's going to be crafting, but crafting is a big part for me. We put 200 hours nearly into the beta, and I would say roughly 80 of those hours were just us crafting. It's a lot of fun. If you like Skyrim style crafting, you're going to like New World's crafting system, which takes us to tip number 6, salvage your items early on. Something I noticed even in the beta was people would get like green items, and instead of salvaging them, they would run over there and be like, yo, I'm gonna sell this because everyone wants this exact same great axe that I just got from the exact quest that everyone else got. You see where I'm coming from? No one's gonna buy it. So you're literally posting things up for sale that, by the way, you're getting charged a post fee for, and eventually it's just gonna sit there forever as no one is gonna buy it. But do you know what you're gonna need? You're gonna need repair parts. Repair parts is what you get for salvaging items, and everything needs to be repaired, from your armor to your weapons. From every encounter, you're gonna have to repair those things. So salvage early on, guys. Don't post everything for sale, and don't store everything. Store materials. Weapons though, dude, you're gonna get new weapons. Trust me. As you level up, you're gonna get better and better items. Tip number 7. Now, this is another personal tip for me. Dedicate to only 2 weapon types early on. Now, when I say early on, by about level 15, you wanna really just kind of zone in on 2 weapon types. Now, before that, do whatever you want, man. Play with everything. If you wanna rock a sword, you wanna rock a great axe, hammer, you want to play support and rock a life staff? That's completely fine. But by about level 15, you really need to start zoning in on 2 weapon types that you really want to commit to. Now, this is important because not only are you leveling up your total level, you're also leveling up the weapons themselves, specifically what you can do with those weapons. And if you're spending your time swapping between all these different weapons constantly and not really committing to 2 weapon types, you're going to run into a situation where, yeah, you might have a good weapon, but you don't have the abilities to really go well with that weapon, especially in late in-game content. And that leveling process, it goes fast at first for these weapons, and then it really starts to slow down, which is why level 15, guys, after you've played with a little bit of everything, start zoning in on 2 weapon types that you just find yourself gravitating towards. If you like using a musket, dude, use a musket. A bow? Hatchets, play with whatever, and then commit. Which takes us to tip number 8. Look at your compass, and more specifically, look at the tracking on your compass. Guys, this was a concept I didn't learn until like later in the beta, and I was like, oh my god, are you serious? When you actually reach the level, say iron for instance, you reach the level to begin mining iron, and then there's like a level beyond that, which says tracking. Now, I thought this was odd, because I would go to my map and be like, all right, I'm looking on my map, and I don't see iron. Turns out, fellas, it's on your compass. Literally, you just move around, you look, and then you see a rock, and you're like, oh, it's right there. And that will lead you to that iron ore. And this applies to all things in the world that you can gather. Now, of course, you have to be within close enough proximity of those things. But once you start to understand the general areas of where these materials are placed throughout the world of New World, then you just run into a situation of just finding it within your eye-shot proximity, which can be kind of annoying. New World's very rich and lush. Its environments and everything, all this growth and stuff. There'll be times like an iron ore is literally hidden under like a couple of trees and a bush, and you would never see it. But if you got the gathering level for it, you can just track it. And this applies to everything. Speaking of which, something I wanted to add in here real quick. Tip number 9. I just mentioned a second ago about tracking everything in the world. Now I'm going to show you how to find everything in the world. Guys, this is newworldmap.com. And there are other map sources out there. I don't even know if this is the best one, but this is the one we use inside of the beta. This map is literally the map and everything on it, including the cities, the ores, the plants, woods, chests, monsters, fishing. You can literally pull up everything. I specifically use this to track down iron ores because I got tired of going to a place that had like 2 ores in it. And I know like right now when you look at it, you're like, yo, that looks like there's a ton of iron ore everywhere. This is a big map. You'll be surprised how far you have to walk in between these ore spots. What might look like a bunch of ore there, turns out not so much. But this map also shows a lot of things, guys. And I would highly suggest whether it's this map or another one, and I will link this down below next to this tip, but whether you're just trying to find cooking ingredients, ores, a specific wood, or essence, save a link to one of these maps as it's gonna really help you out in finding your way around, which takes us to tip number 10. Now, tip number 10 is part of like what makes New World a desirable game, and that it has open world PvP. It's fun, and there's some benefits for having PvP activated. When you go to a settlement, you can actually activate it. Of course, you can't fight within the settlement, but when you leave, you can. There's a timer though. But essentially, while you're out in the world, everything you do, if PvP is activated, results in you getting 5% more experience. On top of that, if somebody starts mouthing off while you're trying to mine some iron, you can mess them up. But on a real note, that 5% more experience is really nice, and it compounds for a lot of things. The downside, well, people can kill you. And a lot of people inside of New World will just kill you for no other reason than you being you. So understand, there are some risks associated with it. Now, do you lose anything for dying? No, but it's annoying, as there's a lot of foot travel in this game, which is why normally if I was in a dedicated area where I was like checked into the inn already, I was good, man. I normally kept PvP on in that area and got my extra 5% more experience, because even if I did die, I just spawn right there in the settlement. So again, there are pros and cons for having PvP activated, and if you do happen to kill somebody, that actually nets you a lot of experience. Which takes us to tip number 11. Fellas, learn to dodge. Now, that's obvious, right? You've seen gameplay, you know everyone's dodging, but brought up by Duke Sloth, and I will link his YouTube channel down below next to this tip, but he actually made a video of the recent stamina changes. inside of New World from the first beta to the second beta, which I'm assuming is still going to be the same in the final release. But essentially, the hidden changes to stamina is actually a couple things. Number one, when you're fully depleted, you actually run a little slower, but your stamina regenerates faster than it actually did in the previous beta. There's a number of other changes he went over and actually really tracked it down to the second and how it differs for even certain weapon types. Regardless though, can you sit there and just block with your life staff or whatever weapon? Sure. Is it better to learn how to dodge? I think so. And on top of that, with the slow that occurs after depleting your stamina completely, you can't just be dumb about it. So learning how to dodge, guys, learning how to manage your stamina, which will greatly save you in all combat situations, that's important. Moving on to tip number 12, capturing the forts gives benefits to your faction, such as increased experience, less housing taxes, and of course, more influence. Now, I don't know if there's been any changes to forts. It was kind of aggravating because honestly, there were times I captured forts where literally no one was there. On top of that, you could literally capture a fort, leave, and someone can come right in and capture that fort. However, there are benefits for having the fort captured in those territories, especially territories that you're going to be doing a lot of quests and other things in that increased experience, that increase influence, all of these things. Similar to that 5% increase in more experience when PvP is activated, these are things that will compound and save you more time. Do you have to go out of your way every day and capture a fort? No. But if you're about to do a lot of things in that specific area, you might want to consider it. Tip number 13, use your camps for both respawn and health. Guys, look, you may just get in there and just be the best chef any gamer could ask for. However, eventually you're going to run out of food and pots and other things. Depend on your campsite. And there's different tiers to your campsites as well. You can upgrade it. It allows you to even do crafting out in the wild. But the main thing is when you rest at that campsite, you get your health back and it can serve as a respawn point. New World has a very large map. And if you happen to be on the other side of the world, killing some dangerous animals and suddenly you die, well, now you're going to have to walk all the way back, which is why having a camp there will save you a ton of time. Which takes us to tip number 14. Use food for consistent health regeneration over potions. Guys, the fact is that potions are the best for that immediate use, and you can use them in combination with food. However, if you're looking for a way to consistently get health over time, food is the way to go. And I would argue and say, find a friend who's got really high cooking, because high quality food can make all the difference. Moving on to tip number 15, faction tokens are capped, so spend them. Now, here's the thing, guys. The way factions work, you can pick up quests directly for those factions, say it's Syndicate, and you go out in the world and you do those quests, and when you come back, you get experience as well as tokens. So the problem is, especially in the lower rankings of the faction, your cap is met pretty quickly. And a lot of people think, I'll just spend them on the higher level items when I get there. But you're literally just wasting faction tokens when you don't spend them. When you reach that cap, you can't go over it, and that won't actually be raised until you reach the next rank. So spend them. And there's a lot of good things you can buy from them. You can buy potions, and a lot of those potions, some of them may be required for the town board quests. So here you have this currency, these faction tokens, which are piling up on you. You might as well spend them on those potions to turn them in for that extra experience. Plus, the gear that you can get from factions is also really good, and it looks pretty sweet. So yeah, before you just let all those tokens go to waste, spend them. Moving on to tip number 16, rest experience will save you hours. Rest experience, by the way, guys, is acquired when you leave your character in a settlement after logging out. You've seen this in many games. It works with camps as well, but leaving your character with a settlement or at a camp will result in you having a little blue bar there when you log in the next day, which will give you increased experience gains. This goes a long way, guys, in saving you time. And more specifically, it's a catch-up mechanic for my fellas out there that just got life going on. You come back home after a hard day of work, you might as well be rewarded for resting with those increased gains. Speaking of gains, let's talk about tip number 17, daily bonuses for your first 3 missions. Now, I can't remember at the top of my head what reset time is for New World, but it does have a 24-hour cycle for its day. And when you get back on, your first 3 missions that you turn in will net you major gains in bonus experience, which means whatever those 3 missions are, they need to be high experience missions. Don't turn in 3 missions that are like 250 experience. Find you a big chunky boy and turn that quest in. And you can even do it with your faction quests. Now, don't get like too carried away with it. Just make sure whatever those first 3 missions that you turn in are your big experience ones, and then you can go after your other missions that have less experience. That way, that increased experience, which I believe was like double back in the beta, will scale off of that higher experience. Moving on to tip number 18. Experience scales off of the higher level zones. It actually scales off the territory that you're in. Now, this is common with all MMORPGs, but it's definitely apparent here inside of New World. Meaning, don't go back to the newbie settlement that you first started out in to start grinding, unless they have crafting or gathering materials there that you need. As far as experience though, and leveling up, be in those higher level territories and grind there, as they will net you more experience overall. And there's a balance here, guys. You don't want to go way out of your way and be in areas where it's like all skulls and every monster can one-hit you. Obviously, that's not going to give you any experience because you keep dying. But try to focus on pushing further and further to higher level areas to get those increase in experience gains. And you kind of want to just bounce between all those higher levels, and eventually you'll be leaving the lower level areas. Tip number 19. We talked about PvP earlier being great experience. It's actually some of the best experience for your weapon mastery. So again, your level is split between your total level and your weapons themselves. And PvP actually does level up your weapons very fast. Now it depends, right? Like if someone keeps farming this noob outside of the settlement over and over, and he's just trying to mine some iron, that's not going to net you a lot of experience. He's been farmed. The best experience actually comes from killing guys that have not died, or at least haven't died in quite a bit. And that scaling really stacks in nicely for your weapon mastery. And leveling up those weapons, man, it can take a while. Which takes us to tip number 20. And this is kind of expanding. We're still talking about experience, but this is expanding on what we said earlier about picking up those town board quests. You really do. If you're going to focus on doing town board quests, focus it on territories where you have a lot of territory standing. Anything that's granting you experience gains or increased experience after you select those territory standing upgrades, I would actually start in the territories that you have the most territory standing in, do the town board quest there, and then work your way down. Which takes us to tip 21. Skilling also levels up your total level. That's right, guys. Everything you do, from gathering materials to skinning to crafting, all of that contributes to your total level. Now, is that going to necessarily help you in a dungeon? Well, it's definitely better to have a weapon that's leveled up alongside your total level. So if you're just purely a guy who skills, you're not going to be much help outside of, I guess, supplying everyone with dope stuff, which is still important. However, skilling overall does increase your total level, which takes us to tip 22. You can skill along the way, but really, guys, I would not heavily invest in skilling until you're really level 45 and plus. Guys, take it from me. I did all of my skilling early on, like pre-level 30, which was a nightmare, primarily because I only had one bag. But see, when you reach level 30, you also unlock another slot to equip a bag, and at level 45, you can equip a third bag. All of this, of course, allows you to carry more weight, thus allowing you to gather large quantity of items without having going back and forth to a settlement over and over. And I did that, man, early on, and I really wish I would have leveled up first, ever before really dedicating time to gathering. Now, speaking of bags, tip 23. There are different levels of bags. Not all bags are created equal. Some of them can hold a heck of a lot more depending on their level. Now, they're expensive, so I never really bought any bags. I just made a lot of them, and you can make them yourself. A lot of them, though, do require a rune of holding, right? Whether it's minor or major. The good thing is that these runes can be acquired right there from your faction. So if you're wondering where to spend your faction tokens, well, voila, you can spend it right there on one of those holding runes to give you an even higher level bag. Tip 24, put your house in a separate settlement as your in check-in. Guys, when you buy a house in an area, you can teleport to your house. This saves you a lot of resources and time, but it doesn't save you if you keep your in checkpoint in the same exact place that you keep your house. And I know this from personal experience because I did it too. Like, what the hell is the point of that? Your in checking, though, guys, is something you can use pretty much wherever you're going. When you're out and about, you're reaching new territories, you're going super far, check into those inns. Just in case you die, you'll spawn right there. What I like to do, though, is actually purchase houses. And yes, you can purchase multiple houses in the settlements that I normally find myself going back to, especially settlements that I have a lot of my gathered resources at. I can go back and forth between them, get my crafting on, sell some items here and there. Having those houses in multiple locations, and I know they're expensive up front, but they save you in cost when it comes to teleportation, and there are also supposed to be ways, I believe, to increase storage through your houses. Taking us to tip number 25. Always attack first in open world. Now, I know this sounds toxic. Really, Cross, there's no like gentleman warfare? No, there's not. You may be sitting there minding your own business, chopping some wood, and you see this guy run across your screen and he's got red over his head. And you think, well, maybe he's just gonna keep running and I don't have to worry about him. I'm trying to get my 5% experience. No. If he runs past you, he's coming back, and he's probably coming back with a friend. Tip number 25, always attack first. Also, tip number 26, whether you're mining or cutting down trees, try to do it at full stamina. Yep, it makes a difference, guys. The speed of which you gather that resource is affected based on how much stamina you have. Now, with the stamina changes and its fast regeneration, this really shouldn't be that much of a problem, but just don't gather resources when your stamina is completely depleted. Which takes us to tip number 27, buy resources in towns that are close to those resources. For instance, fish next to water, iron next to iron ore deposits, fiber next to hemp. The reason why this is important is because number one, the price of those items will be so much cheaper. Most people don't want to take all those things that they're gathering and then travel 2 to 3 settlements away, and if they do, they're gonna mark up for that travel time. Think of it as freight costs, fellas. You want to try to keep your purchases in areas in close enough proximity to where they naturally reside. And again, one of the best ways to really just zone in on certain areas, when you're actually at the outposts, you can select all settlements and whatever it is that you're trying to buy or sell and see what the markup price is. That way you can go to whichever settlement is selling whatever it is you're trying to buy for the cheapest. And there's all kinds of crazy things you can do, right? Like if you know there's a side quest in one of these distant off settlements that requires salmon. Dude, go up there, take all the salmon you can possibly find, mark it up to 300% and sell it in that settlement. And I guarantee you someone will buy it. Tip 29, turn the extra settings on, most notably for your cooldowns. Guys, the default settings there doesn't really reflect all your cooldowns, which is unfortunate. This is just nice information to know in the heat of combat where you can activate some of your skills quicker immediately after coming off of a cooldown without having to be looking at your hotbar the entire time. Again, a subtle thing, but it made a difference for me. Tip number 30, get used to swapping weapons while rolling. Yeah, guys, that's kind of the name of the game here, right? Like we talked about dodging, moving, that's all very important, but swapping and comboing weapons is really where the skill gap widens inside of New World. However, swapping weapons takes some time unless you're rolling. Now, this may have already been patched. I don't know if it is or not, but think of it as like a quick swap glitch inside of Destiny 2 applied here inside of New World. Get used to swapping your weapons while rolling. Plus, when you're in the middle of your roll, if you begin your roll with a hatchet and then suddenly pull out a fire staff when coming out of your roll, it catches your enemy by surprise. You perfect this, guys, you'll really be able to get the jump on your enemies in duels. Tip 31, killing elites are literally the best weapon experience, but you need a group. Guys, if you see the yellow over the top of your enemies, those yellow bars, those are elites. Those are chunky boys. And what we found in the later levels, that there are certain areas that will spawn elites over and over and over again, better than I've ever seen it. Meaning I was able to take a weapon that I just picked up and within 4 hours, level it up to almost max. This is crazy, guys, considering how much time it would take doing quests, dungeons, and pretty much anything else, even killing players, as that's not a consistent way of leveling up your weapons. Again, you can't really do this on the front end, but on the back end, when you really start to get into the high level areas, find a place to farm those elites, and that is by far the fastest weapon experience you can get. Tip 32. Now, I don't know if New World has actually changed this or not, but in order for things to count as a kill, you have to hit it with 2 line attacks. I know it sounds nuts. Completing quests inside of New World can be very aggravating, especially if everybody's trying to farm the same exact thing. Pops up for just a moment, you try to hit it with your best attacks, and it doesn't count as a kill. Why? For some reason, the game wants you to hit it with 2 line attacks. It's almost like the game recognizing, hey, he was here, he did damage, he partook in battle, therefore he gets credit for that kill. So if you're struggling, guys, on completing those quest objectives where it requires you to get kills on certain things that are getting easily and quickly farmed by everyone, just try and get 2 line attacks off. Now, tip 33, loot all the carts you see in every town. Fellas, there are carts inside of the towns that will have a variety of items, whether it's potions, materials, crafting materials. It's not a lot, but it's little things that will give you materials, and it's right there in the town. These little carts, they'll even have a little glimmer shine to it, showing you that they can be looted. You will eventually need some of those resources you can get right there from those carts, so you might as well loot them when you pass them. And tip number 34. This is my final tip here, guys, and my final tip, especially for my in-game players, invest into a single support class alongside whatever it is you're trying to main. Listen, this is the case with all MMORPGs, but it was definitely noticeable inside of New World, which is everybody was trying to be DPS. Nobody was trying to play healer or tank. And even though there are times you can get through a dungeon without a healer or a tank, I can promise you, in the later levels, you will be punished. You have got to have both of those. And there were times inside of dungeons where we were stuck and eventually had to disband because we all were looking at each other and realized we're all DPS. No support. My suggestion is at least invest in either the life staff or sword and shield, one or the other. And I can promise you, you will always have a team in in-game New World. So guys, those are our tips. If we missed anything, feel free to let us know in the comments below. Good luck inside of New World. We'll be going very hard. If you're interested in joining our server, that will be listed in one of the comments. I'll pin it. You can join us, guys. We're gonna try to take over the server this week. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.